For my horse daily, this is Jillian Simon, and we are going to go ahead and work on putting on an all-purpose or hunter-jumper bridle. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I don't have anything tangled. This right here is called the noseband. I've got what we call a flash noseband on this as well. It's kind of an extra mouth shutter for when we get this bridle all the way on. I'm going to make sure the noseband and the flash are pulled away from the bit so that I can get that into his mouth. And then I'm going to make sure I separate the reins and that nothing is twisted. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to walk on up to Ombre here, take my reins, and put them over his head and around his neck. The reason I'm doing this is I'm about to detach him from the lead rope, and I want to make sure I have something extra to hold on to him with in case he decides to go somewhere. I'm going to kind of put that over my arm for a minute so I have him, and I'm going to unsnap the lead rope. The reason I'm doing this is I'm going to put the halter around his neck, and you really never want to tie a horse up by their neck. So if I just took this off and fastened it around his neck with him tied up and something happened and he spooked, he could get strangled or break his neck if he tried to run away. So I'm going to go ahead and unhook the lead rope first, let that fall, and then I'm going to unhook my halter and slide it around his neck. Again, this is just so that if he decides to leave or go somewhere or something scares him, I now have two things. Now I'm showing us an example. I have two things I can grab onto if he decides to run. Okay, so now that I have him, I'm going to take my hand, put it through the top of his ears, and grab the top of the bridle. The reason I do it this way is I like to have control of the horse's head. So if he tries to duck his head out anywhere, I can kind of use my arm up here on his pole to control him. I can also put a little bit of pressure on him if I want him to drop his head. Some horses are resistant to this, so you have to be a little bit careful. And anyway, I have control of his head, so it's harder for him to get away from the bit. I'm going to take my other hand to try to keep my fingers flat, move it up to where his mouth opens. That part's important. I see some people trying to put the bit in their mouth and the bit's nowhere near their mouth, so make sure it's actually where his mouth and teeth open there. Now some horses will just be easy and they'll open their mouth for you, but not this one and not most of them. I'm going to take your thumb. I usually stick it through the ring of my bit, and I'm pushing on this area here. If you look, there's gum here, there's a couple teeth up here, and a couple way in the back, but right here there are no teeth, and that's where I'm going to put my thumb. Obviously not where his teeth shut, but right here where his gum is. So I'm going to put pressure on him. He opens his mouth, we're all happy. I'm going to, as fast as I can, put the opposite ear in, and I'm going to angle it forward. It's important that you don't bend their ears. Their ears are cartilage, and they don't quite enjoy that. So take their opposite ear, bend it forward, put it in. Same thing with this one, bend it forward, put it in the bridle, and pull their forelock out so that everything's just a little bit less complicated. So the first thing I'm going to do, once I have it actually on him, is I'm going to lift the brow band a little bit. Sometimes if it's pulled down, it'll start pulling straps forward, and that's going to change the contact with his mouth, and it's just generally uncomfortable. So I'm going to lift that up a little bit. Make him look a little bit pretty while I'm at it. And then I'm going to do the noseband. The noseband is my favorite and I think the most important part of the bridle, mostly because it keeps the horse's mouth shut and keeps them from pulling and straining on the bit. One thing you want to make sure of, though, is that the noseband is inside of the cheek pieces. The cheek pieces hold the bit to the rest of the bridle, so this is the cheek piece. Now if you go fastening the noseband over the cheek pieces, bad idea, go to use your rein later and nothing will happen. So very, very important. I'm going to make sure that the noseband is under the cheek piece on this side and the other side, and that the noseband is parallel with the horse's head. Perpendicular to the horse's head. So there's a straight right angle from his head to the noseband. Now, this varies a little bit. Some people like to give the horses 2 fingers of space. Dressage people are very adamant that the noseband is very tight. I'll usually tighten it quite a bit. So for Ombre, I'm going to go to the tightest hole here. Try to make sure the extra straps are in the keeper so there's nothing waving around the horse's face as you ride. So he's got a couple of fingers. I'm not getting this too terribly tight. He's got a little bit of room, but not enough to pull his mouth open and strain against the bit. Once I do that, I'm going to do my flash noseband. Now for the flash noseband, you want it snug, but not snug enough to pull down the top part of the noseband. So this is the more important one. And if you start getting this stuff getting pulled down, it actually can cut off the horse's breathing a little bit. So you don't want that. You don't want to restrict this area of their nose. So I'm just going to put that on maybe the 4th or 5th hole, making sure that the noseband is still perpendicular with its head, and that this is sort of just an extra mouth shutter, so it doesn't have to be too terribly tight. Then we're doing the throat latch. This one is the one that you want to be loose. You start getting this too tight, you're actually cutting off the horse's breathing again. So you don't want to get this back by his throat and pushing that really tight, especially if you're going to be collecting them and asking them to drop their head. So I usually go halfway between the horse's cheek or jaw, which is this huge round piece right here. Go about halfway in between and tighten it to whatever hole kind of makes it snug. I don't want it too long and flopping around or so loose that if he puts his head down, he could, God forbid, put his foot through it. I just want it snug enough, but not choking. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take off my halter, take the reins over his head so I can take him somewhere or wherever I feel like taking him. Put the halter, usually you can set it on the ground or you can hang it up. You just don't want to hang it too low in case some other horse comes around and starts pawing and gets their foot caught. So we're going to put it up nice and high. It. And there's Ombre with his lovely bridle and his lovely saddle, and we are done.